Homagyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. We have a Russian group. There's quite a few coming. I think this is a time for a Russian wave of bhakti to go all over the world. Do you feel the same way? One person? He feels that way. Anybody else? How are you all doing together here in Toronto as with the Russian identity, working together in bhakti? Are all of you practicing bhakti? Of course, I didn't even ask, where you're all from and what your situations are. But are all of you acquainted with Krishna consciousness? Maybe you can tell me who's here today and what their experience is so far.
From the audience?
Yeah.
I see some regular faces and then a few know. I'm not sure I've met them before. I think everyone is pretty...
Everyone's familiar with Krishna consciousness?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good to know. And why did you come here today?
To meet you.
And what were you hoping to... What can I do for you? Is there anything that you can think of specifically that I could say or, impart, reveal that you've been interested in hearing that you'd find helpful?
Well, just if you can share knowledge for Krishna with us, that will be great.
Okay, knowledge of Krishna.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have much knowledge, but whatever little bit I have.
Try your best, please.
I'll dig down deep and see if I can find something.
Whatever you can.
Okay.
Please.
Well, there are basic principles that have been very helpful to me. I like to work with principles because principles theoretically or by definition work wherever you go. Do you think the gain is just a tiny bit high? I'm getting a little bit of a hangover, like up.
Yeah, I know.
Up. Hari. I guess that's okay. So one of the principles that I've found is universally effective, is adjusting attitude. In the Nectar of Instruction, do you have that in Russian? The Upadeshamrita? It's by Rupa Goswami. It tells basic principles of Bhakti Yoga. And in the introduction, Srila Prabhupada writes that the attitude of the person who's practicing bhakti will determine his or her success in the process. So of course, attitude is something that we can adjust. If we want to adjust our attitude in a certain way, we can do it. And so one of the attitude adjustments that is helpful for anyone, but especially those practicing bhakti, is to think of oneself as a servant. What would you say would be the opposite attitude? The master, yeah. And so if I think, well, I'm the master, then I have a lot of competition. Because really the whole material world is based on the idea that I will become the master. Either I'll master the material energy, I'll master other people, I'll become the master of knowledge, and I'll use it for myself. But if one instead thinks, let me be a servant, then number one, you don't have as much competition, because not many people think like that. And number two is you'll be welcome wherever you go. Masters sort of push their way in a lot of ways. But even if you're a leader, you can be a servant leader and think in terms of how can I do the best service for others. So I'm just saying that this principle of being a servant is immediately immediately effective, and the reason it is because our eternal nature is that we're servants of God. And when we act in alignment with our eternal nature, we feel happy. Happiness comes from proper alignment, being aligned properly. And if we align our attitude, then no matter what the external circumstances are in my life, I will still feel happy and balanced. On the contrary, if my attitude is not aligned properly, thinking I'm a servant, then no matter what the external surroundings are in my life, I'll feel unhappy. Because the idea that I am the master is out of alignment with my real nature. So this is an attitude adjustment that anyone can make. One of the reasons that we study Bhagavad Gita and other books like Srimad Bhagavatam is to understand my real nature. Who am I? Where do I come from? What is this world? So that we can adjust our attitude. Because as soon as I adjust my attitude, then the world around me will conform. It will reflect my attitude. When you give service selflessly, that is, you're not concerned with getting anything in return. You're doing service for service, then you'll find that you grow. Not only that, you'll find that your influence in the world grows. It's counterintuitive because I do have a sense that in order to have more influence in the world, I have to become more of a master. But paradoxically, seemingly paradoxically, the more I develop a service attitude, the more influence I have. One of the reasons is the most powerful people in the world are people that don't want anything from others. If you don't have any motive, if I don't want or need anything from you, then it's number one, it's very attractive when you meet somebody who doesn't want to exploit you. They're not thinking, how can I take something from this person? They're thinking, how can I serve? It's a very different energy. It's subtle, but it comes from here, and it's very powerful. And also, I can't be bought by any amount of enticement because I don't need anything. And only the people who are thinking of selfless service really don't need anything. And as a basic principle, by definition, the wealthiest people in this world are the ones who don't want anything from the world. As soon as I want anything, then I start to be ruled by that desire. And I was thinking about this morning. When you're dealing in numbers of things, like for instance, let's take money as an example. How much money in numbers will satisfy me? The answer is, there is no amount that will satisfy me, because no matter how high the amount that you give me, I won't be satisfied, because it's just a number and it can go to infinity. And if you give me $1 billion, I'll still be able to think of another number, like 10 billion. If you give me $1 trillion, I can think of bigger numbers than that. And that's why the whole world, there are various places. You can have $1 trillion. If you go to the heavenly planets, they'll give you a credit card up there where you can spend $1 trillion. How do you like that? Well, the answer is you won't. Because even if you get a credit card for $1 trillion credit, you don't have to pay it back. You still won't be happy. However, that rare person who's able to find the core of their existence, that I am a servant of the Supreme, and resides in that, and therefore is feeling an inner happiness through which he or she is not interested in any material thing for him or herself. We want things, we can use them in service. But I don't want it for myself, no interest. That person is satisfied and happy and extremely powerful. because that person can't be bought by anything. In the story of Nrsingadev, does everyone know the story of Nrsingadev?
Yeah.
Half man, half lion?
Yeah.
When Prahlad Maharaj, who was a selfless servant, came, his father tried to interest him in the material world, but Prahlad wasn't interested because he already had the association of Narada Muni and he'd become pure in heart. And an interesting part of the pastime, after Nrsingadev appeared and was fighting with Hiranyakashipu, some of the demigods were watching the fight and they were thinking he's got to win, because if he doesn't, Hiranyakashipu already saw us watching the fight and cheering on Nrsingadev. And at one point, Nrsingadev let go of Hiranyakashipu. You know why he did that? Because he's a cat, half cat. You ever seen a cat play with a mouse? Anybody?
Wait, to play with the mouse.
They play with it. They let it go and they go, go ahead. And then, so that was Hiranyakashipu. It was like a mouse. And Nrsingadev was playing with him. But the demigods didn't know that. And they were watching. And when he got away, the demigods were thinking, oh no, this is terrible. He already saw us cheering on Nrsingadev, and now if Nrsingadev loses, then we're really going to get it. Because they had something to lose. The demigods are attached to a certain position, power, and so forth. And therefore, they had fear in their heart. But Prahlad had no fear because he had already established that my only desire in life is to be a selfless servant. In fact, when Nrsingadev, who was Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, asked him, take a benediction, Prahlad said, I don't want anything. And Nrsingadev said, no, take something. I'm Bhagavan, you're my servant, I give things, you take. And he said, please don't force me to take something, I'm not a merchant. I'm not praying to you, I'm not serving you because I want anything. I'm serving you because I'm your servant and you're my master. So this is the basis of happiness in life, this understanding. Not that I'm serving because I want something. I want a better position, I want more happiness, I want money. I'm serving because that's what I do. I'm an eternal servant. And there's no motive for it. Service for service. This is the beginning of happy life, shown in the Srimad Bhagavatam through Prahlad Maharaj's disposition. Finally, Prahlad said, he asked for two things. Number one, he said, please make my heart so there's no material desires. I don't want anything for myself. Number two, please help my father. The father would just try to kill him. He said, please help him. And Nrsingadev said, I already did. It's already a foregone conclusion that your father is going to be helped because you're his son. So this is something. This is a principle. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it in one of his bhajans. He says, Jeev Krishna Das e bishas karleto or dukonai. That if you want to be happy, then there's a little sheet you can sign up. They give you this little sheet. I'm a servant of Krishna. A little box and you check it off. You can say, there's another box that you can say, I surrender to Krishna unconditionally. So you can fill that in. And if you do that, then you get a little passport. You can go back to the spiritual world. They'll give you a visa. You need a visa to go there, so you have to do that. You have to sign the sheet. I'm a servant. I surrender to Krishna. If you do that, you're fine. So this is one of the most foundational principles of life, that we are servants eternally. And even if we don't declare ourselves servants, we're going to go on serving something or someone. It's just our existential position. But if we align our service properly, then we'll feel happy right away. And one more thing Prahlad Maharaj says that's very interesting, and I think we can all relate to. That is the moment, he says, that one starts to think about material happiness and how to get it, that's the moment that you start to suffer. On the other side, the moment you start thinking how to serve Krishna, that's when you start feeling satisfied. So that's one thing. What else should I talk about? You can give a reflection, which means anything you heard so far that you felt was useful, or you can ask another question. Even if it's a stupid question, but because I give $100 for stupid questions, but I have to check and see if I have $100 in my pocket. Yeah, I got some cash here. So feel free. Yes,
I
Prabhu.
would like to reflect on what you said, that it takes to change the attitude to actually start being happy. If we change our attitude from being masters to being servants, it's more attractive for others and brings us happiness, whereas the other way around is the opposite effect.
Yes, that's right. It's a simple equation. And if you keep that in mind, anytime you feel dissatisfied or unhappy, you can notice for yourself, what's my attitude? What's my expectation? That I'm served or that I'm a servant? 2 more reflections. Yes?
Can you speak louder?
I can repeat what she says.
Sure. That as soon as we start thinking on how much money we can make,
Yes.
we're thinking of material profit.
As soon as we start thinking about material profit or how much money we can make,
Yeah, that's when our suffering starts.
that's when our suffering starts. And also there's no end to it, because numbers go to infinity. And we're living entities, so we can imagine an infinite number. Have you ever had the experience when somebody gives you some money and it's already spent by the time you get it? Somebody gives you $100, and then in your mind, in a second, it's like, that's already gone. It's spent. $1,000 spent. $10,000 finished. Then you get an anxiety because you think, I needed more. You get $1 million, and it doesn't stop. It's not that the number count matters. Because no matter how high it goes, we can still think higher because we're living entities. We can think of infinite numbers higher than what we just got. And so you can get $1 million and you'll still spend it all in your head. This is proof people in the lottery, they win the big lottery jackpots. Do you have that in Canada, lottery? You don't have any bad things here, right? It's like a completely pure place. In America, they have these super lotteries. Sometimes people win fantastic amounts of money. Like, they buy a little thing, they scratch it, there's a number. If it matches up, they win the lottery. So they win $250 million. Does that sound like a lot? Yes or no?
Depends. It depends.
Don't be philosophical, just tell, yeah, it depends, but it sounds like a lot to me, I mean, if you gave $250 million to the temple here, they'd probably notice it in the hundi, right? Like, well, that's a lot. That's more than usual. So, anyway, they trace out the people who win these big amounts of money, and they don't end up better off. They end up worse. They get money, and then their life gets crazy. And people start calling them all the time, like, "Huh, you remember me?" And like, "You don't love me. You just called because I won the money." And then you don't know why people are calling you. And if you don't have any money and you're in jail or something like that, someone calls you, you go like, "God, I'm happy, they love me. Otherwise, why would they call me in jail?" Happiness doesn't come from a number, because the number goes to infinity. So you can't get your mind on that. You can't put your heart on it. There's nothing there. But if we try for that all the time, we'll always be running for the next thing. But if we flip the switch and we think, how can I be servant? Then, because it's noble and it's in alignment with our divine nature, then we immediately feel satisfied. And the more you do it, you can do more. You can think, how can I be a better servant? The more you do that, that's when the numbers of happiness start going higher and higher and higher. You become what's called a Maha-Atma, a big soul. And the soul keeps growing by the amount of service that you're able to do. And you see it practically in the world anyway. The people who do the most selfless service become the most famous. Other people, they may become masters, but they're infamous. They're known because they were so greedy, not because people love them so much. But people who are spotlessly pure in their sense that I want to serve others, they're the ones who are famous. You're going to ask a follow-up question, I can tell.
Yes. How to develop that attitude while we're still engaged
How can you develop the attitude while you're still engaged
in professional activities?
in professional activities?
We're making money to support our families, but how to do it?
You're making money to support your family, but
How can we develop that attitude of servant while not thinking about how much money we make? So it's
how can you develop the attitude of servant even while you're making money and not think about the money and so forth? Well, first of all, it's not illegal to take care of yourself. Being a selfless servant doesn't mean that you abandon your profession and you don't need to make money. You still, even if you develop this attitude that I'm a servant, you still need to feed your family and have a roof over your head, right? And that's not illegal. What the Shastra says, Ishavasam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tina tyaktena bhunjita magrada kasisudaram. That your attitude should be everything belongs to God. And He set aside a certain amount for me. That's called tena tyaktena bhunjita. Bhunjita means to enjoy. There's a certain amount that He's set aside in the material world for me to enjoy. And it'll be kind of obvious. You don't have to overwork for it, but you have to work a little bit and do what you have to do to maintain yourself. And He'll give you something according to what you need. And that's legal. You keep that. And you can use that. And one of the ways in which, while you're making money, you can develop a different relationship with money as a servant is give some of it away. This is recommended in all scriptures of the world, not just in ours, but everybody's scripture. You earn some money and don't hold it all. Give some of it away, give it back to a worthy cause. And when you do that, you'll notice a couple things. One of the first things you'll notice is when you give up your hard-earned money, which is an amazing thing to realize, is that you're still alive. Because your mind will tell you if you give this away, you won't survive. Like, you're not going to enjoy. If you give this up, then you're going to suffer. But you give it up, and the opposite happens. You feel bigger, feel happier, and you realize, there's still a whole world of resources out there. I still have access to it. And you actually become self-realized by giving away a portion of what you earn. So this is one way that you can change your relationship with the money that you earn. And people who do that, they become very powerful. I saw even, I go give regular talks at Salesforce. Do you have them here in Canada, Salesforce? Yeah, so Salesforce, it's the biggest company downtown San Francisco by far. They have huge, and Mark Benioff, he's the CEO. He met some spiritual people in the beginning of his career when he's had a few really good entrepreneurial endeavors. He's made a lot of money, had some good companies, pretty smart. And he met some spiritually minded people, teachers, when he first started, and they said, don't keep everything. You give away, what your company makes. He set an example for Google, for Apple, for a lot of them. They're following what he does, and he gives away a percentage of what the corporation makes as part of their bylaws. And they give to all kinds of things. And you'll notice the atmosphere in the place, it's very different. And they're not losing any money. They're also not losing any money. They're actually kind of known as a philanthropic organization and things like that. And it makes the environment different. It's kind of naturally more spiritual. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about this in the 12th chapter. He gives a series of ways in which you can be connected with Him. One of them is to think of Him all the time. And if you can't do that, he said, then practice thinking about me some of the time. He said, if you can't do that, then work and give away some of your money to spread Krishna consciousness. He said, if you can't do that, then just try to be charitable in whatever way you can. Because when you give, you grow. And you start to see that when I do service, when I give away some of my hard-earned money, then I actually feel bigger. And the universe opens up to me in ways I couldn't expect. And this is the beginning of the idea of bhakti, is to be a selfless servant. It's counterintuitive to the mind, because the mind's thinking like, I got to hold on. But we become actually happy when we give ourselves to Krishna more and more. And we have to do it by increments, because we may not be able to do it right away, exactly everything. But that's okay. Nice questions, thank you. Shall I take one more? One more reflection or question before I go to the next point? Yes, Prabhu.
So what I liked when you told that someone, it's nice to meet somebody who changed his attitude and seems so like talking so kind of this person, right?
Yes, it's nice to meet somebody who's changed their attitude to a servant's attitude, right? Yeah. Like, just to comment on that, you know, in any assembly, if somebody comes in with the mood of service, you'll notice it right away. Especially if it's, you know, they don't have a motive. It's very powerful. That person will shine. On the other hand, if somebody comes with the motive of being in the center, you can sense it right away also. Just like if somebody eats a lot of garlic, as soon as they walk in the room, everyone goes like, hey, who's eating garlic? It comes out of your pores, you know. So the same thing, when you have that ego, it also comes out of your pores. When you think, I'm the master. Even if you're acting like the servant, if you have that ego that I'm going to be the center, it comes out. And the opposite, with Vaishnava, when we meet a pure Vaishnava, you feel a different energy in the room, and it's because of what's in their heart. Because they've already decided that I'm giving all my service to Krishna and his living entities by serving him. You had another point.
Yeah, another point was about if a person like this changes his attitude, so this person is everywhere welcome.
Yes. Not so much competition. There's not so much competition for a selfless servant. You'll be welcome wherever you go. People are like, wow, please come in, stay. The opposite is true. Other people, when they have that mood of false ego, then people are glad when they leave. Okay, should I make another point? Okay, this one is, yes, Prabhu. Yes. How to what? Less selective. Well, another thing is, being selective in your service isn't necessarily illegal, because we all have certain nature. And the best kind of service, according to Sanatana Goswami, he says this in the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, the best kind of service for each person is the service they like the most. And so if you're attracted to a certain kind of service, like some people are attracted to doing deity worship, they just want to be on the altar. We have a devotee who, he joined Krishna consciousness, and from the day he went to the temple, all he could dream about is getting initiated and going on and taking care of the deities. He didn't want to do anything else in life. And when he finally got the opportunity, he practically lives on the altar, because that's all he wanted to do. We told him, no, you have to be a GBC or something like that. First of all, he wouldn't be good at it, and second of all, he wouldn't feel satisfied. So you should do what you like. Krishna's not a taskmaster. He's not a tyrant. He wants you to be happy. So you should do, you're free. You're a free living being. You're an individual. You should, as Prabhupada said, managers in Krishna consciousness, those who are taking care of others, helping them to organize so they can be Krishna conscious, should create an environment in which they do service that's individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. ISV. Individual, spontaneous, voluntary. And so that's the right kind of service. On the other hand, more to your point, if we have no motive in our heart that I have to do it a certain way, that I'm actually flexible to do whatever's needed. I'll give you an example. In the Gaudiya Mutt, you know the Gaudiya Mutt? So in the Gaudiya Mutt, there was big success in India. They had these temples. Temples are called mutts. And so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta started this organization called the Gaudiya Mutt. And they developed all over India, very successful. And in one area, this town, there was this one devotee who was getting great success, developing his area. But the other devotees thought that, he's just puffed up. He had some business background, that's why he's successful. He's doing it for himself. That was their thought. So they went to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and they told him, we think this person is not really a selfless servant, but he's in it for himself. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta called that devotee to his room. He said, okay, how's your project going? He said, really well. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, I'm transferring you. And he was going to send him to some other far-off place. And the devotee said, okay, Maharaj, ready to go. He said, okay, you can stay. See, I just wanted to see what your motive was. And really, he already knew, but he wanted to show it to the other devotees. This person had no motive. So we actually should be attached to a certain kind of service. And simultaneously, we should also be ready to do the needful, whatever it is. That's another part of selfless service. In the early days, when Prabhupada was here, many devotees had this feeling that whatever Prabhupada wants, we'll just do it. For instance, Sudama and his wife Chintamani, they lived in Los Angeles. And the Srila Prabhupada called them into his room in LA. And he said, I want you to go to Japan. Sudama said, but Prabhupada, I don't speak Japanese. Neither of us do. We've never been to Japan. We don't know anything about it. And Prabhupada said, if your house is burning and you need help and you live in a neighborhood where people don't speak your language, somehow or other you'll get help. So he said, if you go in that mood, then Krishna will help you. And they were very successful. But the point was they were ready to go. They didn't hesitate. So, we should be ready to adjust if we need to, but it's not illegal to want a certain kind of service. In fact, you'll find in the Nectar of Devotion that a very special kind of prayer is to ask Krishna for a specific service that you want to do and cry for it, that you want it so bad. Is that okay? Okay. We still have time? Or are we finished? 10 minutes. Okay, I'll make one more point. What do you think? One more point?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So here's another principle that I've found is highly effective everywhere. What's the first principle I taught?
Service.
Selfless service.
Self-service.
Yeah, it aligns us perfectly, and it's like a switch you can flip, and if you do that, then you'll naturally feel satisfied. So that's the first one. And the second one is our attention is very important, where we place our attention. I'll teach you a phrase that you can use as a mantra. Are you ready? Please repeat after me. Where attention goes, energy flows. So wherever I place my attention, my energy will flow in that direction. So first thing, you want to ask yourself, where do you want your energy to go? And the second thing is you can notice, where are you giving your attention? So don't waste your attention. It's the most valuable thing that you have. There's nothing more valuable than your attention. And also, I'll make a more radical statement. It's the only thing you have. We don't have anything else. All the other things we think we have, they're just borrowed. But we have free will. Free will has to do with where we place our attention, because we are units of attention. That's what we are. And we can place that attention in any direction we like. We have that eternal choice of where to put our attention. And bhakti really means training your attention towards Krishna. And the more that you do that, the more you'll feel satisfied. In a very practical way, when you chant Hare Krishna, if you give your attention to the chanting of Hare Krishna, then you'll become very successful in bhakti. And if you lose your attention on the holy names, then you'll become discouraged and you'll feel like you're not making advancement. That's how powerful attention is. And it works in relationships also. If you want to know how to have a better relationship, find out what kind of attention you're giving to the person that you're having the relationship with. I have an example of how powerful attention is in relationships. I was sitting at a meeting in Mayapur. I was tired. I'd been sitting in a lot of meetings. And there was a veranda. I could sit on the veranda and I was looking out in Mayapur, just trying to relax for a minute and be by myself. And somebody found me, another colleague who was very enthusiastic. He pulled up a chair next to me, ready to tell me something about a service that he was doing where he needed some help or something like that. So my first thought was, oh no, I just wanted to be by myself. Second thought was, if I don't give him my attention, he'll take it personally. I could give him half attention, I could pretend like I'm listening and not really listen, and he'd feel it. So I had been talking about attention recently before this happened. So here's what I did. He sat next to me, really enthusiastic to tell me something. So I made a conscious choice that I was going to give him my full attention, undivided. So I turned my chair and I faced him, and he jumped. He's like, what? He actually said these words. He said, no one's ever actually done that for me before. And then I was thinking, what did I do for you? I didn't do anything. All I did was turn my attention in your direction. But he took it as such a gift that to this day, when we see each other, he's very warm and friendly, and as if, we have this really tight connection, and we do. He told me some nice stuff too. I mean, it wasn't that he didn't have something to offer. And I took it in. But I noticed on that particular time, I've noticed it before, but because I was actually experimenting with it and I made a conscious choice to do that, I saw what the result was. And this works universally. Anywhere you go, the more you give your undivided attention to another living entity, the more you'll find reciprocation. Of course, some people don't want you at all to give them attention. Like if you're driving down the freeway and you're next to another car, if you start giving them attention, but that just goes to show you how powerful attention is. What are you actually doing when you look at somebody driving next to you? If you watch them in the car, they'll go, get away, What are you actually doing? You're projecting your consciousness into their car. And they'll be like, get out of here. Because you actually go there. So if you use this, the power that you have to appropriately place your attention in the places where it should go, into your most cherished relationships, you'll find that they'll bloom like flowers when you water them. They just come out. That's how powerful your attention is. We are just like Krishna in quality. When Krishna looks at the material world, the whole place blooms. This is how the material world starts. Krishna looks, and his glance impregnates the material nature with consciousness, because we project our consciousness into things. So just as Mahavishnu makes the whole world come alive, similarly, whatever you look at and give your attention to, that will come alive. So you decide, this is your only asset. How will you use it? Where will you place your attention? And if you use it judiciously, if you place your attention in places that you've decided ahead of time are worthy of your attention, then the results are unimaginably great. And if you waste your attention and let it fly around here, there, and every place else, then you're losing your greatest asset. We have time for 1.5 reflections. Okay, you're the one, and then after he's going to have to give a half a reflection. Go ahead. She's asking how to engage her children in Krishna consciousness. She has a 16-year-old daughter.
Yes, and
she knows that I come to the temple and I do. She knows that she comes to the temple and she does devotional service.
But she doesn't seem to be interested,
even though she's not against it.
Yes, but I still would like her to develop.
But you'd still like her to develop Krishna consciousness. So what to do? How could you get her to put energy into it, right? 16 years old. How can you help her? Well, the best way you can help her is to set a good example. Because 16-year-olds really notice if you walk your talk. Kids notice in general. They're very observant that you actually follow what you're preaching. So it's easy to preach. Anybody can say, should be like this, should be like that. But actually doing it, that's another thing. And so with kids, this is what I've observed. You can't tell them anything, especially if they're 16. And if you try to tell them something, then they may become more resistant. But if you set an example for them and show them by your example what it's like to actually be Krishna conscious, what it looks like when somebody's Krishna conscious, they'll be taking that in. They'll actually be drinking it in. They'll notice it. And when they have a moment of clarity, or you could say sanity, after they go through puberty and everything like that, they'll be able to reflect on that, and they'll have something to come back to, an example. They'll have some value in their life from that. So that's the most practical thing that you can do, is just be a really good example. And when she sees that, then there's something there that's very tangible. There's a lot more that can be said about parenting, and there are others who are more qualified than me, but to talk about it. But that's one thing I can tell you in the waning minutes of our time together today. Well, I would ask for a half a reflection, but I didn't know what it would look like. Okay, go ahead, let's try. So we don't have anything but, and then comma, and then that's the half, so. Attention. So we don't have anything but our attention. Yeah, that's true. And if you think about it, it's our most important asset. It's not nothing. It's something extremely powerful. Your consciousness is part of Krishna. Krishna is unlimitedly powerful. And you're very powerful. In fact, how do you think mystic yogis get their mystic powers? You can read about it in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna tells the secret there. They put their attention on a particular element in the material nature, and they become so focused on it that they start to take on the qualities of that element. For instance, they can become like light as air because they gave their attention there. It takes a lot of attention, not like they got their iPhone in the other hand, That's not mystic yoga. It's not going to happen. It's an intent. But that's an example. And if you put your attention on Krishna, it says in that section, that's where you place it. You can attain anything. And you'll never be defeated by anybody. So that's the principle of Krishna consciousness. Manmana bhavamad bhakto. Krishna says, put your attention on me. And whatever you have to do that, that's yoga. And if you do that, then you'll be successful. So 2 things. Be a servant, adjust your attitude, and think, how can I be a selfless servant? No motive. Second one, where attention goes, I'm not feeling it. Where attention goes, still not really feeling it. Where attention goes, yeah, come on, you're Russians. Let's try this again. Where attention goes, that's right. So Russians rule. As far as I'm concerned, we need more Russians in the world. This is the time of the Russians. Feel free to take over the world with Krishna consciousness. You have what it takes, I guarantee you. Russians are the most endowed people in the world. Intelligence, aesthetics, talent, health. It's amazing. So please feel free to conquer the world for Krishna. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.
Marman, Nachari Marman, Nachari Marman, Nachari Marman, hey, Nachari Marman, Nachari Marman, Nachari Marman, Nachari Marman.